Okay, this lesson is on photosynthesis and energy transfer. Get the students thinking by asking, how do plants make their own food? We will move on to this video, which just shows different life cycles of the plant and how they grow up over time-lapse videos. It will give the students an idea of how plants grow, how they start in the soil, how they get up here, and what makes them grow up here. So I'll really put an emphasis on that. That way for this next activity, they can have a visual aid. This activity will be in groups. So I will ask again, how do plants make their own food? Each group will use whiteboards to write down 1, 2, maybe 3 answers on how they think this happens. And then out loud, the class will share these answers. It'll only take a couple minutes. That way we can get ideas flowing and thinking before we move into the actual note section. I will explain after this lesson. Students will be able to explain photosynthesis and its importance in the energy cycle, identify main components and stages of photosynthesis, and lastly, analyze a diagram and relate it to real-world examples. So putting these out here will allow students to think about the ways that they are, think about what they should be expected to know after the lesson. This is a diagram of a chlorophyll. So this is where photosynthesis takes place the most. First, we're going to have our outer membrane that goes the whole way around. And then our intramembrane that goes all the way around as well. So then we have outer, inter, and then we have this inner membrane. That is the tiniest circle there. And then our stratum, which is all of the yellow things. It can also be known as aqueous fluid, whichever is, those two words should be able to use interchangeably. And then here we have our granule stacks. Here, one of these is an actual thylakoid, so we have a stack and then the actual thylakoid. And then our lamina, which goes all the way across. It connects these stacks each here. And then we have our lumen, which is the very inside. So, this is a thylakoid, but on the inside is a lumen. Our inputs for this cycle are going to be sunlight, CO2, and H2O. So sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water can be used interchangeably. And then our outputs are going to be the sugar molecule that they use. Worry about it being sugar, not so much the chemical compound, and O2, which is oxygen, like the oxygen that we breathe in. And then you can see that the composition of Earth's atmosphere is 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and 1% other. So this oxygen component here is what we're really going to be focusing on. And it's just good to know that there's other things within the Earth's atmosphere that we don't necessarily think of in our day-to-day life. And then we're going to go through our light-dependent reaction. So this one requires light, which is why it is light-dependent. Up here, you're going to see the light-dependent reactions are the first stage of photosynthesis. It is the process plants use to make their own food. It all takes place in the chloroplast of the plant cells, specifically the thylakoid. So the light-dependent reaction is thylakoid. And then sunlight powers the process. Step 2, the water will split. And step 3, energy carriers are made. So these are our 3 main steps that we should know. The Kelvin cycle, which is also known as light independent because it doesn't require light. Kelvin cycle, light independent, these should be used interchangeably and be able to be understood in the same context. The Kelvin cycle is the second stage of photosynthesis where it happens in the chloroplast, unlike the light-dependent reactions. This part doesn't need sunlight. Its job is to make glucose or sugar that plants can use for energy and growth. Step 1 will be carbon dioxide enters. Step 2, energy powers the process. Step 3, making the sugar. And step 4, recycle and repeat. So these are our 4 main steps. We should be able to know and identify each of these and reiterate them. And then here is just a diagram of what that cycle is going to look like. So we input light. We also input H2O, so light and water come in. CO2 goes into the Kelvin cycle. And then once you put light and water in, it's going to produce that oxygen, that O2. And over here, we're going to produce that sugar for the plants to use. So light and water go in to give us oxygen. Carbon dioxide goes in to give us sugar. And you can see that these can go either way. They bounce off of each other. So ATP and NADPH are going to go over. But if we're going from the Kelvin cycle to the light reaction, we're going to have ADP and NADP+. And then here's a visual aid of the process. So if you think about it, rain's going to come down, carbon dioxide goes into the plant, carbohydrates come down, water is going to be sucked up here into the roots and it's going to spread through the whole entire plant and it's going to give out oxygen. You can see that the light comes in. So this is a good way to think about how all of this kind of ties into itself. And then if you reverse the reaction, you get cellular respiration, which is what we as humans do. Cellular respiration is the process by which cells convert glucose and oxygen into energy. So cellular respiration and photosynthesis are just flipped examples of each other. Here you can notice the difference in each of these. So in respiration, you are bringing in oxygen, putting out carbon dioxide. This is how much time it takes, and this is your equation. In photosynthesis, you are taking in carbon dioxide, putting out oxygen. Here's the time, and here is your equation. So think about how these can be compared to each other and how they can connect to each other. And then we're going to do a comprehension check. So I'm going to ask, why do plants need sunlight? These answers will be covered. And then explain the role of chlorophyll in photosynthesis. This will also be covered. Students will have a few moments to answer these independently, and then we will talk about them as a group so that I can think about where the students stand and go over things before we move on in the process. And after we think about those concepts, we're going to move into our table activities. So here, chloroplast diagram, that way students know what to grab, and I'm not having to repeat myself while they get set up for this. They will have a blank chloroplast, as seen here, and they will be asked to fill in each of these to see what they remember, and then they're going to talk about where each the light-dependent and light-independent reactions take place, and just overall discuss what we just talked about, but in a visual form. These will be the directions put up onto the screen. That way students don't have to ask me to repeat them. So it will be label the diagram accordingly, discussing the importance of each part. Highlight where the light independent in the Kelvin cycle takes place. Students will be given time to do this part before we move into our think, pair, share activity. The think, pair, share activity. These will be the directions put on the board as well. Independently, write one sentence summary of the light-dependent reactions using vocab appropriately. 2, independently, answer the application questions. 3, pair up to share and refine your answers when finished. Step 4, share your answers with other groups when you are confident you are correct. So these two, independent, these are going to be the think portion, where students have to think about what they just learned and apply it. Pair, they're going to pair up with those around them to refine their answers, discuss where they might be wrong, discuss where they might be right. And then our share portion, the whole class is going to share with each other in a student-led discussion. So I will be completely taken out of this part, that way they can do this on their own and they can apply the knowledge that they just learned. And then, how does photosynthesis affect the real world? This is going to be another open discussion where we talk about photosynthesis, how it connects to other cycles such as nitrogen, the phosphorus cycle, things like that. And how photosynthesis has an effect on those cycles. And then this is our last part. This is going to be our exit ticket questions, where the students will answer these questions independently and then turn them into me for me to review. So this will not be gone over in class. This will be a final final assessment on what they learned throughout the class, and just a little exit ticket screen, that way they know to turn in their final answers.